Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about mental health. I hope you're all keeping safe, keeping well, and trying the best you can to cope with these challenging times. Today, we'll be looking at COVID-19, taking action to improve employee mental health. And more specifically, we'll be looking at the definitions, the mental health challenges induced by COVID-19, the strategies to support mental health and well-being at home and at work, and lastly, the take-home message. Now, what is mental health? Mental health can be defined as an emotional, psychological, and social well-being. There's no one definition of mental health. As you can see, WHO also has their own definition, and they define it as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make contributions in his or her community. And here I added an illustration that just gives more definitions of what mental health is and what it isn't. Now, when it comes to defining mental illness, the definition is different. It's defined as a health condition that changes a person's thinking, feeling, behavior, and that causes the person distress and difficulty in daily functioning. And mental illnesses can be referred to as mental health conditions. So I hope we've been able to capture the difference between mental health and mental illness. So here are some general mental health facts that I thought is important to know. 1 in every 4 persons worldwide experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. I'm sure a lot of us in attendance can relate to experiencing grief after loss. Now, grief has certain stages, and one of the stages is depression, which is categorized as a mental health condition. I'm sure some of us can also relate to going 1 or 2 nights without getting sleep. You've tried to sleep, you're not able to sleep. Now that's insomnia, and also that is categorized as a mental health condition. So mental health conditions or mental illnesses are quite common. Stigma and discrimination against patients and families prevent people from seeking the mental health care. Stigma means calling people with mental health conditions crazy, amerogwa, cheesy, such words prevent people from seeking help. They feel like if I go see Kevin, I'll be labeled these words again. So it prevents them from seeking the support they need. Mental illness does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your age, your race, your sexuality, your religion, your social status. It doesn't pick and choose. It can afflict anyone. Now, on March 11th this year, the WHO declared the coronavirus a global pandemic. And since then, and even before then, actually, when it was declared a global health emergency, there's been a lot of uncertainty, misinformation and fake news. We've been forced to adapt to ways of living that involve lockdown, isolation, quarantine, social distancing. We've seen people lose jobs, lose businesses and their sources of income. And this has induced certain mental health challenges. For example, anxiety, depression, high levels of stress or stress-related disorders like PTSD, in full post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse of drugs and alcohol, and grief due to experiencing loss. Now, there are over 200 different types of mental health conditions, and each of them have their own criteria of diagnosis. But there are those telltale signs that can help one identify if you're going through a mental health condition or someone else is going through a mental health condition. For example, suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm and attempts, You were sleeping well before, now your sleep is poor. You're either oversleeping or you lack sleep. There's a decline in work performance or academic performance if before you were doing well. Extreme mood changes, loss of interest in things that you found interesting or your daily activities. And one of the key ways to identify also is uncharacteristic behavior. For example, let me use Eddy as an example. Let's say, for example, if Eddy is driven, social, is neat, joyful, then you start to notice that Eddy is becoming withdrawn from others. He's starting to neglect his personal hygiene. He's starting to lose interest in things. His mood is changing, starting to use substances. His weight has changed. Those are indications that the person may be going through a mental health condition. Now, I chose to talk a little bit more about depression and anxiety because these are the most common mental health conditions in the world. And it's what we're seeing primarily today. There are many cases of depression and anxiety due to the pandemic. Now, depression afflicts approximately 300 million people worldwide. Anxiety afflicts approximately 275 million people worldwide. Depression is categorized as a mood disorder, and the symptoms involve persistent sadness, feelings of worthlessness or hopelessness, irritability, loss of interest in things, thoughts of suicide, tiredness or fatigue, disturbed sleep, and also there's physical symptoms such as headaches, joint pains or muscle pains, and even stomach pains. Now, anxiety is quite broad, though it's defined as a state of fear or worry or both. Now, it's very natural to go through, to feel anxious right now. It's very natural to feel anxious because of what we're going through or what we're living through. Human beings experience mild to moderate levels of anxiety. When you're feeling nervous, that's a mild to moderate level of anxiety. Now, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to experience mild or moderate levels of anxiety because it's what reminds us to wash our hands, to sanitize, to keep a bit, to keep safe, to social distance. Now, when the anxiety becomes severe, meaning it starts to consume you and affect your ability to function, that's when we call it an anxiety disorder. And the symptoms involve trembling or tremors, increased breathing rate or shortness of breath, feeling nervous or powerless, excessive worrying, thinking patterns of excessive worrying, agitation, heart palpitations or heart high rate, and sweating. Now, what causes these mental health conditions? They're caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Now, your brain has three very important chemicals when it comes to mood and mental health in general. There's dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Now, these chemicals are supposed to be balanced in a certain way in the brain for healthy brain functioning. Now, when they become imbalanced, that's when now you start to develop a mental health condition. Now, certain factors cause this imbalance, and one is genetics. You can be predisposed to getting a mental health condition if there's a family history of mental illness. The same way if there's a family history of diabetes, of hypertension or high blood pressure, it's the same concept. Substance use and abuse also triggers chemical imbalance. The reason why people get intoxicated or inebriated when they take a substance is because it's triggered a chemical imbalance in the brain. Mainly it triggers dopamine. And for some people, it can reach a point where the brain is no longer able to balance the chemicals naturally. So as a result, the chemical imbalance happens. Trauma and stress as well. When we're traumatized or when we're stressed, it activates our nervous system, adrenaline is released, and we go into a fight or flight response. Now, when we go into a fight or flight response, also the chemicals in the brain get triggered as well, and they can become imbalanced. Lastly, pre-existing conditions. Physical health is directly related to mental health and vice versa. There are many cases of people who've been diagnosed with cancer who have developed depression as well. Now, how are mental health conditions treated? Medication. There's different medications for different mental health conditions. And for depression, you have antidepressants. For anxiety, you have anxiolytics. For psychosis, you have antipsychotics. So there are different types of medication, and what they do, they try to balance out the chemicals to where they're supposed to be. And once those chemicals are balanced, the symptoms start subside. We also have psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is very important as well. You learn coping strategies, you learn how to manage the condition, you become more self-aware, and therapy also helps you process things that maybe you hadn't processed before and are causing distress in your life currently. Support is also very important. Support from your loved ones. A lot of the time, we see that we've had patients come into the hospital and they've been treated and they've done really well, they've recovered. And once they go home, they relapse because they don't have that support, that adequate support that's conducive for their recovery. Now, here we have strategies to support mental health and well-being at work and at home. What should employees do? The first thing is to learn about mental health. For you to be able to nurture or improve your mental health, you need to know what mental health is about. Check up on each other and stay connected with your loved ones. Call them, text them, social media. Find out how each other is doing. Have a regular daily routine and set clear tasks for the day. Have a to-do list, take breaks. This is to prevent getting burnt out or overwhelmed. Engage in your healthy hobbies while practicing social distancing. For example, if you enjoy taking walks, that's fine, but make sure you're keeping safe and that you're practicing the precautionary measures. Limit your media intake. And this is very important because right now, every second there's news on coronavirus. And it can really get overwhelming, especially for people who are severely anxious. So it's important to limit your media intake, but if you need information about what's going on or you need to keep up to date, use reliable sources. And the recommended sources are WHO and the Ministry of Health. Adequate sleep is very important. Without adequate sleep, you get burnt out. If you get burnt out, your immune system is compromised. So it's very important to maintain adequate sleep. Eat clean and healthy meals at home and at work as well. Avoid junk food, cut down on substances that are harmful. Eat healthy, try to eat healthy. Try to stay positive as well. And I know right now, things are quite challenging, but it's also important to remind ourselves of what are some things in our lives that are still going well. In other words, count your blessings, because when the thoughts are positive, the emotions are positive. And when the emotions are positive, the behavior is positive. Have a healthy work-life balance as well. If you're going to the office to work, make sure you create that boundary where, you do work at work and try not to carry work home. It's important to have that balance. If you're working from home though, try to have a designated work area where you can separate now your work aspect and, your personal life aspect. Also leave days. There's some people who have a very bad habit of not taking leave. And it's very important so that you prevent getting burnt out. Physical exercise, physical activity and exercise is also very important because it's immune boosting, it's a healthy distraction, you produce endorphins, which are feel-good chemicals, which help elevate mood. It's a good way to process things. And I've added some relaxation exercises that are quite effective when dealing with anxiety. One is called grounding techniques. So what this does is when you're feeling anxious, try to name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, and you can switch it up. Next time it can be 5 things you can taste, 4 things you can hear, like that. What this does is, because anxiety tends to take you away from the present and what's going on around you, this now grounds you and helps you be aware of what is happening in your surroundings. Deep breathing techniques help a lot as well. And it involves breathing in through the nose for 4 seconds, holding it for 7 seconds, and out through the mouth for 8 seconds. And repeating this as much as you can until you feel the anxiety is reducing. Practice good hygiene and follow the precautionary measures. That's hand washing, wear the mask, social distancing, stay home and self-quarantine if you have flu-like symptoms, and so on. Now, when it comes to the employers as well, it's very important you learn about mental health, because for you to be able to take care of yourself and your employees, you need to know what mental health is about. Share the relevant health and safety information from reliable sources. Encourage and ensure good hygiene practices. It can be through policies, it can be through trainings. Also create an environment and, if possible, provide resources which allow employees to work while practicing the precautionary measures. It can be technological devices to, which allow them to work from home, if that's an option, providing the masks and sanitizers. And also an environment where people can feel comfortable to talk about the issues they're going through without feeling judged or stigmatized, and while maintaining that confidentiality as well. Flexibility in terms of work hours, and especially for the people living in the COVID hotspots, maybe considering them working from home and so on. Providing access to mental health services is also important. Maybe having an in-house psychologist or an in-house psychiatrist or a counselor who can provide that service, or that therapeutic service. Encourage employees to practice self-care. And this means try not to call your employees at ungodly hours. It's important they have adequate sleep. Encourage them to exercise, to take their leave days, to eat healthy, and so on. And lastly, take care of yourself. Again, for you to take care of other people or support other people, you have to take care of yourself first and support yourself first. Now, I thought it was important to add also how to support our children. And again, learning about mental health. Secondly, regular communicate with them. There's an assumption that some children are too young to understand something, or too young to be affected by some things. But one thing about children, they're very aware from when they're 2 years old. So explain to them the situation, because they can see that things are changing. They can see that things are a bit unusual. So explain to them the situation in a simplified manner, of course, an age-appropriate manner. Check in with them, see how they're faring on, and reassure them. Ensure that they have a routine that provides a sense of stability and that keeps them engaged. Schoolwork, and some people are learning from school. Make sure there's allocation to complete schoolwork. If it's homeschooling. There's allocation of time for exercise. They have a sleeping time, a waking up time, they're taking breaks, and there's time for them to engage in their hobbies as well. Teach them the safety measures like hand washing, wearing a mask, covering the mouth with sneezing or coughing, and so on. Adequate sleep and healthy diet are also very important for development and well-being in general. Do positive activities with your children. Play with them, cook with them, dance with them, painting, drawing, board games, exercise, and the list goes on. Help them connect with their friends and family. I'm sure a lot of them miss their classmates, and they can connect through video call or phone call just to keep in touch. And again, lastly, self-care, because the best caregivers are the ones that take care of themselves. Now, for the take-home message, it's very important that we all understand there's no health without mental health. Also, kindly follow the public health guidelines. And if you feel you or a loved one may be experiencing mental health challenges, help is available. And I wanted to finish with this image which says, staying positive does not mean you have to be happy all the time. It means even on hard days, you know that there are better days, better ones coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Indeed, no health without mental health. So thank you for that. There are quite a number of questions that are coming in, but I will allow Eddy, I believe he's online now, to kind of give us a shared experience. And then thereafter, we'll have a Q&A where we will then be able to channel the questions to each of you respectively. So thank you very much, Kevin. Eddy, are we set up?
All good. If you can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. We were wondering what happened to you. So karibu sana. We had made the introductions in your absence, so please feel free to plug in and give us your story.
Okay. Thank you for logging in, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm Eddy Kimani. I'm a mental health campaigner with a key agenda of advancing the mental health conversation, creating and facilitating mentally healthy workspaces around us, spaces that are free of stigma and spaces where people should not be afraid to ask for help when they feel that their mental health is at risk. It's my hope that you're all keeping well and staying safe as we fight this coronavirus pandemic, which is part and parcel of what is right now destabilizing our mental health and well-being. This conversation we're having today wouldn't have come at a better time, especially as we adjust to the new normal, working from home, isolation, lack of social connections, and just adjusting to this new way of doing things. I will start off with why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing right now and how I've used lessons through my struggles with depression and anxiety and my wins and lessons and how I've in turn used them to maintain my mental health and my overall well-being. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an actor, I'm a friend, I'm a son, I'm a media professional, I'm a content creator, I am a teammate, and like all of us here, there are many little things that make us who we are. And I believe that each and every one of us here, no one thing defines us or defines you. I've suffered depression and anxiety. These two are some of the most common mental illnesses out there. There are about 200 types out there. What I'm here to do today is to share my lessons and how we can individually play a role in ending the stigma that surrounds mental health, especially in and around the workspaces. I have failed. I've failed in numerous relationships. I've failed my marriage. I've failed my 2 young sons. I've failed in school. I've failed in business. And the list can go on and on and on. All this as a result of some bad decisions, self-indulgence, ego, selfishness, which eventually led to my mental breakdown. Now, due to the short time I have with you here today, I will share my Engage Kenya video link in the comments area. This video is the genesis of why I'm in front of you here right now, as it paved the way for me to share my story and pick up this role as a man who is passionate about his own mental health and well-being. At the same time, I would like to share my lessons that we may all embrace our mental health. And with the help of friends, family, therapy, I've managed to get back on my feet. And I worked out what I needed to do to be able to take care of my mental health and well-being. Speaking at Engage and telling my story to an audience, I realized that to be open about my journey and at the same time, look for ways that I'm going to demolish the stigma around mental health and creating ways to help others, especially in the workspaces. I've devoted my time in jumpstarting conversations and encouraging everyone that it's okay to talk about your mental health. It's okay to talk about your mental ill health and seek help when you need it. I'm also dedicating my time in creating safe spaces for men to talk about their own mental health and also help in letting everybody, everyone, every employee, man or woman, prioritize their own well-being. So I've put together an outfit called Mind Bright Resource, which aims to create and facilitate safe spaces for advancement of the mental health conversation. At Mind Bright Resource, we're also creating solutions for interventions where we can fight the stigma, normalize the mental health conversation, and in creative and innovative ways by way of training, interactive awareness programs, creating online content, and many more engagements. We are currently running an online series called Eddy and Company Live this month as we celebrate the Mental Health Awareness Month, where we're hosting leaders on a weekly basis on the online show. We would like to see CEOs and all those in leadership positions to come out and talk about their own mental health and their well-being. So I'm proud to say that our first edition last week of Eddy and Company Live in the Me and My Mind series, we hosted the CEO of Twiga Foods, Peter Jonjo, and he unreservedly opened up about his own well-being. And he also shared the great efforts his organization, Twiga Foods, is doing to help the staff manage their own well-being. I will share more about this, and I'll also share the link for that video later on in the comments area. So, mental health. The opposite of mental health is mental illness, with depression and anxiety being the most common disorders out there. WHO, the World Health Organization, defines mental health as a state of well-being which an individual realizes their own ability to be able to cope with normal stresses of life and work productivity, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. My colleague, Kevin Gachee, has already shared that, and that was a pretty important presentation, and I'm glad that he was part of this conversation. Now, some reports indicate that 1 out of 5 people is depressed. Depression does not discriminate by race, gender, profession, social status, or education. It does not care if you're married and you've got 2 children. It does not care if you have a job or you're homeless. For somebody who's going through depression, it can be very tough, and depression will whisper into your mind and into your ear that you're a failure, that you'll never be successful. Let me give you some statistics of the state of mental health in our country right now. The Kenya Mental Health Policy 2015-2030 indicates that mental disorder cases have risen exponentially. Estimates indicate that 20 to 25% of our outpatients seeking primary health care present symptoms of mental illness at any one time. There are not sufficient qualified personnel and facilities to take care of this lot of patients. And we are in unprecedented times where the services of mental health and personnel is in so much need right now as we fight this pandemic. A 2015 performance audit report from the Auditor General's Office on the state of mental health in Kenya paints a grim picture that as of 2015, there were only 92 psychiatrists in the country instead of the 1,533 that are required. Millions of Kenyans who are struggling to get these basic needs are exposed to mental disorder triggers stemming from an environment, cannot afford this privilege. And the impact of the coronavirus pandemic is like a time bomb about to explode. Now, stigma and lack of accurate information continues to cost the global economy about $1 trillion every year in productivity due to depression and anxiety. Having gone through the dark journey that I went through dealing with my depression and anxiety, feeling like a loser, I am now on a very purposeful path. I'm more purposeful now, and my purpose is very simple. I just want to create a world, and a world that everybody feels that they genuinely have a choice to raise up their hand and ask for help. I just want everybody to feel that they genuinely have that choice, especially now, as the world is being ravaged by this coronavirus pandemic, and our mental health, the fabric of our mental health, is under attack. And why? Because in every place, be it at work, at home, or anywhere else in the world, everybody always feels that they genuinely have that choice to ask for help if they're suffering from a physical illness. And as I journey through this path on a purposely led life, I've learned a couple of things, and one of them is to maintain my own mental well-being. Now, through all our journey of life as human beings, 80 to 90% of the time, we seem to be more interested on our physical being, looking and understanding how this body is doing, isn't it? But we now know that it's important to maintain our emotional health. How do we manage our feelings? What I've also learned is that one of the most important things right now, and something that I'm exercising more today, is to constantly practice self-compassion, self-care, learning to be compassionate to myself, learning to make myself happy, learning to be happy always. Think about this. As we grow up, we're taught about hygiene. Wash your hands before eating, wash your hands after using the toilet, and so on and so forth. But nobody is teaching us mental hygiene. Nobody. So every day I'm learning and embracing new lessons, which include learning mindfulness, self-care, and as I said, self-compassion. All these aspects are really important as we begin to look after our own well-being and our mental health. In a world that right now has just done a backflip on us as human beings with the entry of the coronavirus, which brings me to a very important point that needs to be tackled head on in advancing this conversation on mental health. And that is stigma in the workplace. Now, stigma in the workplace is rampant, and it's really affecting those affected by mental illness. The people suffering from some form of mental illness, studies are showing that there is profound consequences of stigma, which includes diminished employability, lack of career advancement, poor quality of working life. So how do we begin to break this stigma of mental illness in our workplace? How do we manage our own mental health and well-being under the current circumstances that the whole world is facing right now? In order to do that, I'm learning there are several ways that we can break this stigma specifically in the workspaces, in our workplaces. One, leaders need to start talking. We need leaders to tell their stories. We need leaders who can stand up and tell their own stories. We need leaders to advocate and invest and train staff on mental health. Do you know that over the years, many organizations have spent millions for the health and safety? And yes, this is a very important investment, I must say. But most of it is going to safety. But the time has come now that we need to invest more in the health and the energy of our people, our staff, our employees. Why is this important for our leaders to talk? It's because if we see leaders coming out and talking about their own mental health, it will give people that permission to ask and seek for help when they need to. it will facilitate a culture change, and it will change the society to a society that will always prioritize to look after its own mental health. A society that has the culture of prioritizing its own well-being. What we want to do is to get more leaders behind the agenda of mental health and creating workspaces that are safe and where spaces that are okay, where I can ask for help when I'm experiencing a mental illness. I cannot express this enough. Senior leaders can really help us in helping and bringing on this culture change. Number two, just start that conversation. At an individual level, what can you do to break the stigma? Start the conversation about mental health. It could be a conversation with a friend, could be a conversation with your wife, could be a conversation with your husband, could be a conversation at a place where you frequent. But please start that conversation. And I truly and honestly believe if we start these conversations, anything is possible. Number three, we need to change the mental health narrative. We need to shift that narrative around mental health in and around our workspace and even at home. The narrative around mental health is so negative. The moment I mention mental health, people immediately start thinking of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. When I mention physical health, people don't go straight away to glandular fever, diabetes, or cancer. No. But if I'm going to a gym today, I look around and I see this individual or working hard, pushing, lifting the weights, I feel inspired. I tell myself, I want to look like that guy, and so forth. And that is all just to maintain our physical health, which is still important. But on the flip side, what are the images that we see about mental health? If you Google right now, most of the time, you'll find some black and white photo of somebody looking depressed or distressed. There is nothing inspirational. There's nothing aspirational. Nothing that will inspire you or me to maintain my mental health and my well-being, our mental hygiene. Who is the Eliud Kipchoge for mental health? Who is Wangari Maathai of mental health? I think if organizations can get this right, if we as individuals can get this right and take a more holistic view of how we look after our mental health and feel it as an advantage and as a source that gives us energy, all our efforts will in turn get the capacity and the passion to be able to change the world. So I'm hopeful that what I've done here, I've done several things, and I'm hopeful that I've given you a sense of why I'm passionate about living this life on a purpose. And that's where I'd like you to join me on this journey on breaking the stigma around mental health, especially in workspaces. Considering that now we are more or less working from home, living at home, I'd like you to start embracing your well-being and to know that it's okay not to be okay, that you can ask for help. People feel that they can ask for help when they're suffering from a physical illness. But it's sad that in this day and age, we still have people suffering in silence because they feel that they cannot ask for help when it's something to do with their mental health or their well-being. As I've mentioned, my journey is driven with a deep interest and purpose to just create safe, conducive spaces and facilitate spaces where people feel that they genuinely have the right to ask for help if they're suffering from a mental health challenge. And finally, I hope I have just provoked and inspired some of you to go out there and tell your story. If this session has moved you in any way or provoked you to talk to somebody, please talk to somebody. If it has inspired you in any way, like some of us who have stories, please share. We all have a story. Just share it. It saved my life. One mental health advocate by the name of Geoff MacDonald, and I quote, once said that every single story we tell, every story we share is like sending a lifeboat out into the ocean. And those that are suffering in silence hold on to that lifeboat because they realize they might just have that opportunity to be normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddy. Indeed, it's okay not to be okay, and we must be able to speak up. So a couple of questions, and perhaps, Kevin, you can also put yourself on video so that we can then share the questions with you. So Eddy, perhaps some thoughts on your experience of mental health, especially at leadership and at the board level. How should that conversation look like, or be structured or managed?
Well, something that came to me as a you know, like a realization after just doing a lot of finding out and soul searching and finding out how can we kick off this conversation at the board level, at the highest level of any C-suite. I believe having a conversation as basic as talking about, or even just having a way of normalizing how we deal with how we are feeling, how we embrace our emotions is very important. And that's why I'm very keen on seeing through this intervention, that is CEOs, senior managers, basically anybody in the leadership position coming out, more importantly, to talk about their own mental health well-being. Let's hear CEOs talking about their struggles. Let's even hear the president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, talking to us about his struggles. And I believe the impact would trickle down, all the way down to Wanjiku. When Wanjiku sees His Excellency, the President, talking about his struggles, I don't know if it's possible, but I think it's a path that needs to be explored, to see leaders coming out and talking firmly about themselves and talking about their struggles. It just normal. I think at that level, in that boardroom, it will start normalizing the conversation of mental health, which, of course, characterized by all the stigma that surrounds mental health. It would really go a long way if that conversation would come from that level. And it could be just a simple conversation, as I've mentioned. It doesn't have to be anything technical, something simple. Even if you're starting your boardroom meeting, you could start off by finding out how everybody is doing individually, and even say how you are doing as a person leading that meeting.
Okay. So right now, you know, we have a lot of businesses in distress. Retrenchment is real, salary cuts. And of course, this has affected, you know, people's well-being, both financially and mentally as well. You know, what are your thoughts around managing people through this process?
Well, is that for me still?
Yes, you can. And if Kevin has some thoughts, he can plug in as well.
Okay, I believe the starting point would be to just show compassion to your team. And as I'd mentioned, I had a very grand opportunity of speaking to the CEO of Twiga Foods, that is Peter Jonjo. And he and his team already have measures that he actually works on to ensure that his staff benefits from the measures that the company is putting in terms of being able to respond to certain issues, being able to respond to staff when they come out to you and say, you know what, I need to take a break. I need to be able to deal with what I'm going through. But of course, there are many other obvious channels that we would have to measure. Of course, the organizations can help you identify specialists, the likes of Kevin, to come in and just talk to them. But if you provide a platform or a space within your working organization for your staff to be able to feel that they're not going to be judged or stigmatized because of sharing their mental health status or sharing their mental health well-being status, would go a long way in helping your staff to be able to know first you're concerned. And I think it would start from there, showing concern to your staff and being able to show them that you are also a human being like them, and you have your downtimes and your up times, and engaging them at that level would help a lot in making that conversation easy to have. Then of course it leads to other steps, which we do now to bring in specialists to come and talk to them. If there's a specific case in the organization that needs more attention, we do have individuals, specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counseling psychologists who are out there who definitely will be reached out to be able to come up with interventions to help them.
Okay. Kevin, this one. Okay, yes, please.
just to add on what Eddy said, also celebrating awareness days. Like for example, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, but celebrating awareness days just to spark that conversation. Inviting mental health champions to speak about mental health, and as Eddy said, creating that environment that employees feel safe, they feel like they're not judged, they feel supported, so they're able to open up and talk about these issues. A lot of the time, before the mental health condition gets to a severe level, some things can be done. Just a conversation can also help. A debriefing session. You can even have debriefing days where maybe there are group sessions where people debrief about things that they're going through and things like that. So yeah, that's what I wanted.
All right, this one is for Eddy. So at what point did you come to the realization that you had a mental health issue? I remember growing up, watching you on telly, just seeing the life that you lead. So at what point did you get where you sort of felt you needed help, and what were some of the triggers that got you there?
Great. Now, as I've mentioned, the genesis of why I am doing what I'm doing right now came about after I did that Engage video. Now, that was the first time that I shared publicly the dark season that I went through between 2015 and 2018, where I'd lost my family. I was in so much debt, and my coping mechanisms led me to a lot of relying a lot on alcoholism, and just staying off social contact, and disconnecting from people, and just digging my hole even deeper. So my realization came about when I thought I had gone all the way to the South Coast, to thinking that I'm running away from my problems, and I was actually just relocating my problems to another part of the country. And remember, a lot of what I'm pushing is all about starting these conversations. And fortunate enough, one day, this fellow just started a conversation with me. And at the time, I was in a space where I thought I do not need to share anything about myself. I need to deal with it my own way. So I was totally blocking out everything. But in a weird way, that conversation sparked a cycle of change that now got me to realize and sort of slap me out of this deep hole I was in. 2 days, I think, not yet, 3 days prior to that, meeting that chap by the name of Peter Makwana, who's actually now a very good friend of mine, I'd actually considered taking my own life, because I'd reached a point I thought I was a complete failure. Everything had collapsed around me. I'd lost, let's say, everything in my life. I did not have a job. Here I was in a new area, a different space, a different county. I did not know anybody, and imagining that I was dealing with my problems. So my spark of that moment, which I call now my Damascus moment, was now having that conversation with Peter, because that now coming to my senses and being able to realize what was going on with me, I now, of course, reached out for help, professional help, and therapy came in. I was able to now pick up and learn from where I'd fallen. And I think the biggest challenge we have is being able to pick up ourselves and starting all over again. That's where the crux is, where we are not tooled or wired properly to know what you need to do when you get to that point. You'll go through that dark season, but at that point, that Damascus moment for me, if it had not happened, I would have, I don't know, it would have been a different story today. But that was the moment for me when I was at the lowest of the lowest in Ukunda.
Okay, I note that we are running out of time, but finally, Kevin and Eddy, as you give your final thoughts, as HR professionals, we are the ones charged with taking care of employees. When we go back home, we have our families as well. So sometimes the information may be inundating. how do we take care of me, quote and unquote, as a HR professional who's then required to play all these hats within the organization? Perhaps you can respond to that and then just give us your final thoughts before we ask the chairman to give us some closing remarks. So we'll start with you, Kevin, and then end with Eddy.
Okay.
Self-care is very important, and I think one of the main thing is focusing on what you can control. Because now, there are things you can control, there are things you can't, and focusing on what you can control and just giving yourself, nurturing your personal life, like having that work-life balance where, when you're out of work, you take care of your personal life with exercising, you talk to your loved ones. I also advise, therapy is for everyone. Therapy, you don't have to have a mental health condition for you to go for therapy. Therapy helps you become self-aware. It helps you process things. So even therapy is one angle you can look at for self-care. But mainly, focusing on what you can control and just doing the activities you like to do and just having that work-life balance. Try not to, carry the things that you experience at work with you at home. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We can have your thoughts and also let us know whether there's a community that we can join in case we just want to be part of that conversation or share experiences.
Okay, just I'm a firm believer on those points that I've shared with you, especially HR encouraging top leadership within the organizations to just create an environment in their respective departments where they would make it okay for somebody to come and say, I have a challenge. And being able to have some compassion, especially in these times. I know everybody's, I know there's that acronym I'm seeing now being floated around, WFH, which is working from home. And I feel this should be extended to the level where you can give your staff from the leadership position an opportunity or the space. Now, also bringing in professionals to help in training. For example, you could have a mental health ambassador in your organization. You could have a mental health advocate in your organization. That one person who would actually be championing mental health strategies, mental health programs within your organization. Because the moment your staff starts seeing the importance you're putting in and in the investment that you're putting into their own well-being, believe me, it just continues to reinforce what the World Health Organization continues to say, that there is no health without mental health. And once your staff have good health, they will deliver, they will come through. I'm not quite sure of the statistics or the numbers in Kenya or most of Africa in terms of how we are doing mental health wise in organizations, corporate organizations, SMEs. But I believe it's time that we start embracing as organizations and investing more into the well-being of their staff. And there's so many things that can be done, so many programs that can be laid out there for staff to benefit from. Yeah, and starting the conversation, just talk amongst yourselves, encourage your staff to talk to you, keep that open door policy and just make it really stick true to its true meaning, an open door policy to come and talk to you. I remember there's a story online I saw a week ago where a lady, I think it's in Australia or somewhere in Europe, where she sent an email to the boss saying that she's taking a 2-week leave to go and deal with her own mental health issues. And of course, the natural response or the natural thought is that she was going to be blasted for doing something like that. But the CEO was in touch and he actually encouraged it. And if you just Google the CEO who wrote an email to the staff about mental health, it's a very big and a trending story up to now. It just shows having that connection and being able to understand when a staff member comes to say, I need help or I need to go and deal with this, take some time and find out, even extend help to them. Besides that, love one another, be kind, check up on each other at work, encourage that in your organizations, and you know, and it'll have its own positive repercussions, especially right now as we go through these very unprecedented times.
Thank you, Eddy, for your thoughts, and thank you for being vulnerable and giving us your story. Very, very powerful and very insightful. So at this juncture, we welcome our chairman, Bwana Joseph Onyango, to give us some thoughts. And karibu sana, chairman.
Thank you very much, Rose, and thank you very much, Kevin and Eddy. It is really quite insightful, and I also want to say good morning and jumbo to all the HR professionals who are tuned in and listening to this. Indeed, this is Rose. Once again, I'd like to tell you, together with the IHRM Secretariat, that this has been extremely helpful and timely. And I see where messages streaming in and people really appreciating the real life stories. And sorry, I came in a little bit late. I think I did not really quite get Kevin. He had just finished. But, sorry, but I got the entire of Eddy's presentation. Just from what Eddy has told us, I think everybody will relate. It's only that we do not have to wait until it goes to the extreme. And HR professionals have been asking ourselves the questions of who motivates the motivator, who takes care of the welfare of the person who is supposed to take the welfare of the others. And for example, in the place I work, at my place of work, we say, who protects the protector? Of course, at the National Police Service Commission. And the story for Eddy's story is really touching, and I know we have really learned a lot, Eddy, across the board. And it just helps us and re-energizes our energy towards what, the efforts that we're already making at our own levels and strength towards mental stability of our people at work. We have 1,000 stories and 1,000 examples to give around issues of mental health, but I'd like to tell HR professionals that, including myself, most of the time, it is until it has gone to the extreme, that is when we think that it is a mental situation. But we all know that we can start early enough by actually preventing people from getting into those extreme situations. I want to give you my own story also as CEO, and very briefly, CEO of the National Police Service. You know the situation that is happening with our police officers today. And one of the biggest focus that personally I'm having, both as an HR professional and as a CEO, is to look at that emotional and mental well-being of police officers. I'd like to encourage HR officers to actually, and HR leadership, to actually give a push towards that, because that is really what is lacking. Today, with this COVID scenario, what is happening all across is the physical well-being. And Eddy, you've exemplified it very well. Everybody is ready to even donate masks, gloves, sanitizers, and all that. But very few donors will be keen to put their money on the mental well-being of our officers. So what did I do as an individual? And I championed so much. And actually, we were just in Parliament, was it last week or this week? And what I championed for was not the physical, was so much about the money to take care of the mental and emotional well-being of police officers, because they react, in most cases, the way they react today, if you've met most of them on the street, because of their emotional well-being. That balancing, we realize that is where the gap is. And in order to prevent this from happening, so that people do not reach those extremes, a research, simple statistical study research showed us that people arrive at that condition because of lack of HR intervention and the things that we do not do right, like in our case. What are these things that we do not do right? They're simple matters of transfers, simple matters of promotions, simple matters of grievance handling, those basic primary HR issues. And that is what I think that HR should be encouraged, that once you sort out that, then you'll have fewer and fewer cases of people going to the extreme. And so that example will help to serve HR professionals to see that before you reach actually to this extreme, you play a very important role of in between on what we call preventive measures. Because at the same time, we now know today that we need to look at our workers or colleagues in terms of the entire of that colleague, not just the financial, not just the work related, but also from home front, seeing the welfare or well-being of that human being. I want to thank you very much and the Secretariat and all HR professionals. And as usual, it is also my role and duty to give you a few highlights and updates on what is happening. I'd like to just make an announcement that this could probably mark the last free webinar from IHRM, and we are looking at, because we have to have our own BCP program, that is Business Continuity Program, and we want to relook at how we are conducting these webinars. I know they have been really quite helpful, but I think time has come. We've really done our best to motivate HR professionals and give them free sessions as much as possible. Secondly, is to note that we made advertisements out there for certain critical positions that we've seriously needed to fill in. We want to make sure that our membership services, especially during this period, what COVID has taught us is that we want to perfect them, especially going online. And therefore, we have some positions, and we've advertised. You can go to the website and check. Of interest will be the position of HR. I know it will be highly competitive. You are encouraged to apply if you feel you really want to make a career, not really a career, but you want to give service to the HR membership body. I think that those are the most important aspects today, updates that I'd like to give. Another last one for the people of Nairobi region is that we had a court ruling, and the court finally we've concluded on the process. Remember, there was a court case of the position of council member for Nairobi, and the court ruled in favor of IHRM, and now we are free to open up that position. And therefore, anybody interested should actually come and contest for Nairobi area as council member. We'll be advertising that as well next week. That is, I know there'll be many issues, but I really want to encourage and thank you very much, HR fraternity, for keeping on and helping our society at large during this very difficult period of the COVID pandemic. Asante sana, Rose.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We want to say a big thank you to our panelists today, Kevin and Eddy, for taking us through mental health. And as they say, vulnerability is the only authentic state. Being vulnerable means being open for wounding, but also for pleasure. Being open for the wounds of life means also being open to the bounty and the beauty. So thank you very much all for attending. We look forward to seeing you next week on Friday, where we will be talking about financial well-being, which is really about making smart sense of your finances, especially in this time of COVID-19, as organizations continue to cut salaries for staff. So we'll see you next week. Asanteni sana. Have a great weekend and keep safe. God bless you.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, everybody. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Asanteni. And I'll share the slides with Eric. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Rose, I've put the links on the comment, unless you want me to post them again.
Yes, what you can do is if you could send them to me on email so that then we can post them on the IHRM site, that would be great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Asante. Bye.
Thank you.